Indeed, Magnus Carlsen is widely regarded as one of the best chess players in the world, known for his exceptional skills and consistency in winning tournaments. However, there have been rare instances where unexpected players have managed to defeat him quickly. In this video, we'll explore some of these surprising victories against Magnus Carlsen and the strategies employed by the players who managed to defeat him in a matter of seconds, beginning with Alexander Morozov's remarkable win.
This is the King's Knight.
The match began with Carlsen making his first move by advancing his pawn to c4, to which Morozov responded by moving his pawn to e6. The game quickly evolved into an English opening, with white's pawns occupying c4 and g3, while black's pawns were on d5 and f6. Morozov captured one of Magnus's pawns on c4, prompting Magnus to swiftly move his bishop to g2 and then castle his king for safety. At this point, Magnus had already secured his king's safety, whereas Morozov had an extra pawn, which he defended by placing his pawn on b5. As the game progresses, Magnus Carlsen makes a strategic move by advancing his pawn to a4, putting pressure on black's central pawns. With the white pieces, Magnus is determined to secure a victory. Morozov responds by moving his bishop to a new diagonal, resulting in a trade of pawns. Magnus also places his bishop on a diagonal. Interestingly, Morozov seems to have a slight advantage at this point, and Magnus appears somewhat dissatisfied with his position. However, the game's dynamics soon changed. Over the next few moves, Carlsen initiates an attack on Morozov's king. He starts by trading his rook for one of Morozov's knights and subsequently engages in pawn exchanges. This exchange reveals a triple threat on Alexander's pawn on f7, creating a more favorable position for Carlsen. Alexander Morozov immediately defends his vulnerable f7 pawn by using his queen. Magnus then makes a pivotal move, knight to g4, signaling a potentially lethal attack. Morozov must defend his position perfectly to stand a chance of winning. In response, Morozov moves his bishop, and Carlsen counters with knight to f6, forcing a trade of all the pieces on that square. Magnus aims to bring his queen into the fray to infiltrate Morozov's position, but it seems too late. Morozov already possesses a significant material advantage, and he only needs to trade off pieces to secure a victory in this game. In the next few moves, Morozov continues to apply pressure and forces another trade with bishop to d5, pinning Magnus's bishop to his king. After several complex piece exchanges, Morozov maneuvers his king into a corner while simultaneously threatening a checkmate by capturing the pawn on h4. In this dire position, Magnus Carlsen has no choice but to resign. Morozov's tactical prowess and material advantage seal his victory in this game. The next match is worth exploring for more surprising chess moments: Magnus vs Boris Savchenko. In this game against Boris Savchenko, Magnus Carlsen made a significant blunder that would go down in chess history. The game started with Magnus moving his pawn to e4, to which Boris responded with c5. This led to the game transitioning into a Sicilian defense, with white's pawns on c4 and e4 and black's pawns on c6 and f6. Both players then castled, resulting in a balanced position. However, Magnus Carlsen tried to create an advantage by playing his bishop to e3, intending to launch an attack after advancing his pawn to f4. Boris Savchenko remained unshaken, placing his queen on a5 to connect his rooks on the back rank. Magnus moved his rook, and Boris responded by relocating his rook to a more active square. Little did they know, they were about to step into a highly tactical and complex sequence of moves. Magnus initiated a quick attack by moving his pawn and forcing Boris to retreat his knight to safety. In a critical moment, Magnus made a significant blunder by moving his knight to d5, giving away a free pawn on a2. Boris seized this opportunity and captured the pawn with his queen. Magnus then pushed his pawn with a plan in mind, and after a few more moves, Boris made a blunder by playing knight to f6. This mistake allowed Magnus to play knight to c3, and after Boris moved his knight, Magnus was able to play his pawn to b5, winning a knight. Boris realized his mistake and surrendered his knight. Now, Magnus Carlsen was in control, and after some piece shuffling, the bishops were traded off. Magnus then offered a queen trade, which Boris should not have accepted, as playing an endgame against Magnus is exceptionally challenging. Boris had no choice but to accept the trade that allowed Magnus to capture his queen, leading to a simplified endgame. However, Boris Savchenko made a significant mistake by advancing his pawn to f5, which in reality only played into Magnus's hands. Carlsen brought his king closer while several pawns were traded. Another error occurred when Boris moved his pawn to c3, coming closer to promoting it to a queen. Magnus blocked this move and Boris defended the pawn with his bishop. The position slightly favored Magnus, but he had to play perfectly to capitalize on his advantage. As the game progressed, Magnus traded pawns and pieces with Boris, leading to a position where Magnus had a rook and 2 pawns, while Boris had a bishop and 4 pawns, including a strong passed pawn. The position was likely headed toward a draw unless one of the players made a significant blunder. Then came the critical moment. Magnus Carlsen moved his king to d3, seemingly looking to defend his pawns from Boris's king. However, this move turned out to be a disastrous blunder. Boris responded by moving his bishop back to e1, creating a check. Magnus, perhaps in a hurry, moved his king to d4, which was a blunder that allowed Boris to capture a rook for free. Boris executed the move, and Magnus, realizing his error, immediately corrected his king's position. Unfortunately, this was an illegal move, and Boris promptly pointed it out. Magnus acknowledged the mistake and stopped the clock, signaling the end of the game. The loss resulted from an illegal move, and while it was a surprising turn of events, it was a testament to the importance of precise play in chess. Magnus vs Judith Polgar. In this casual game against the renowned chess player Judith Polgar, Magnus Carlsen faced a devastating defeat. The game began with Judith playing e4, to which Magnus responded with c4, leading to a Sicilian defense. After a few opening moves and piece development, Judith decided to castle queenside. As the game progressed, the knights were traded off and Magnus placed his bishop on b7. In response, Judith tried to dislodge Magnus's knight, but Magnus had a clever tactic in mind. He captured Judith's pawn on g4, a move that couldn't be recaptured because it would expose her rook. Judith was left uncertain about her best move, but eventually she moved her rook to dislodge Magnus's knight. The game continued with a few more moves, and after Judith moved her bishop to e4, Magnus made a terrible blunder by placing his rook on c8. This was a critical mistake, and Judith immediately capitalized on it by playing her bishop to b6. This move threatened checkmate on d7 if Magnus were to capture the bishop. Magnus contemplated his options for a considerable time before deciding to capture Judith's bishop. However, by this point, he had already lost the game. After losing his queen and bringing his knight into the game, Magnus realized the futility of his position and resigned from the game, all within just 19 moves. Judith Polgar's victory demonstrated her incredible chess prowess and tactical awareness. Magnus vs random player. In this memorable game, Magnus Carlsen faced an opponent who was not a professional chess player but challenged him in a bar in Norway. Despite being a casual match, it turned out to be one of the most surprising games in chess history. Carlsen played with the white pieces and began with e4, which his opponent responded with e5. This led to a standard Roy Lopez opening with the knights developing and c3 played. Magnus's opponent then played e6, which aimed to chase away Magnus's bishop. As the match began, it became clear that Magnus Carlsen was extremely confident in his moves and played quickly, while his opponent, referred to as A, appeared to think carefully before making his moves. In the early stages, Magnus gained a slight advantage with well-placed pawns in the center and started preparing for an attack on the king's side. His pieces were more active, and it seemed that he was well on his way to victory. However, A realized he had made mistakes and began to struggle. Magnus continued building up a strong attack, and eventually A made a critical error by moving his knight. Magnus seized the opportunity and trapped A's bishop, causing him to lose a piece. Despite the unfavorable situation, A continued to play, and Magnus played queen to f3. A more aggressive move like queen to g3 might have been better, however, he was still in a commanding position. A plays rook to h5, threatening a potential checkmate on h2. Magnus responds with queen to h5, but this move is described as another mistake as it doesn't threaten checkmate. A's body language indicates he's in trouble, but he continues playing under pressure. A makes an attacking move with his pawn to g7, further complicating the situation for Magnus. A's body language shows that he's aware of the critical nature of the position. Then, an unexpected turn of events occurred. Magnus made a mistake by playing knight to f5, allowing A to win a pawn while attacking Magnus's queen. Magnus quickly captured A's knight in an attempt to set up a fancy queen fork, but overlooked that he had blundered his queen. Realizing his blunder, Magnus Carlsen immediately resigned from the game, visibly unhappy. His earlier confidence and fast moves had led to a critical error, resulting in a loss against an amateur player. Despite this surprising loss, Magnus Carlsen remains one of the world's top chess champions.